Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our very exciting live stream this evening to talk about Sony's brand new, newly released camera, the Alpha One. Good evening. My name is Nick Rowe. I am one of the digital imaging product specialists here at Sony Australia. And tonight I'll be the mediator because we do have a very exciting panel of professional photographers and videographers to discuss their thoughts and ideas around the Alpha One camera. So without further ado, I think we'll just dive straight in. And joining me this evening, we have Mark Gaylor, Julia Trotti, Craig Parry, Heath McKinley. Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
G'day.
Hi.
So I think the best way to do this is we'll just dive straight in. To start off, I think I'd like to just highlight some of the biggest things about the Alpha One camera. First off, it was announced less than 24 hours ago. So it's been a mammoth day of very exciting stuff with a lot of new technology. So what I'd like to do to begin with is I just want to flag some of the really key features that's come out with the Alpha One. And then to our panel here, I think I'd like to break it down and we'll just discuss some of these key points and we'll go from there. So the Alpha One does come with a wholly new 51 megapixel stacked sensor. It has 30 frames of continuous shooting in electronic shutter, 8K video recording, with 4K 120 frames per second. Ships with S-Cinetone, the same color palette that you'll find inside the FX9 and FX6 cinema cameras, as well as introducing a whole new array of autofocus performance. So with that in mind, I think, Mark, I'd love to throw to you first. You've had a lot of experience and a lot of time within the Alpha system. When you see these specs and you see a camera like this, what's your first instinct? What's your first thoughts around the Alpha One?
Yeah, well, the first off, I picked the surprise announcement incorrectly. I thought the one never seen would be a curved sensor in an RX body. So I have to say it was a surprise to me as well. This was more, one ring to rule them all type release. So first off, I'm super excited because when I was shortlisting product of the year, which no other camera reviewers listed as their product of the year, was when the stacked CMOS sensor first appeared in the original A9. It was obviously a great leap forward for sensor design. And obviously this sensor allowed the camera to shoot 20 frames per second in a fully electronic shutter. So it was pretty much groundbreaking camera. And then I waited for it to be rolled out over other cameras. And apart from a couple of RX cameras, the A9s pretty much have exclusive rights to that stacked sensor.
Yeah.
So to see that stacked sensor come out again, but in a new and improved version, just shows you what the potential for this technology is. Obviously, we've gone from 20 frames per second to 30 frames per second. We've gone from 24 megapixels to over 50 megapixels. And the scan rate, which avoids that shutter distortion, because effectively you can be using silent shooting to use to capture fast action.
Yeah.
It's just mind-blowing, really, that they moved that technology forward after these years. And I think just the amount of new features on this camera is they're not going to edge ahead of the competition here. It's almost like they've run a complete extra lap and overtaken all of the competitors. I think
I want to hold you up there, Mark. Let me hold you up, only because you've crossed off so much stuff that we need to unpack. Let me put you on pause. I want to rewind almost back to the very first thing you said, because I think it's really, really important, which is that stacked sensor. Yes, like our RX lineup, that stacked sensor, it's in a smaller sensor size, 1 inch, but in this case, it's full frame. And maybe Julia, you could give us a bit of insight. Like with a 50 megapixel sensor, what application are we going to get from such a high resolution sensor? And as Mark said, something that can offer 30 frames per second.
Yeah, it's insane what this camera has to offer. I'm very excited to take it out for a test run and see what it's capable of. I'm very excited for the 30 frames per second shooting. I think that would be something very fun and exciting to use. I'm also really keen on the autofocus performance as well. I do a lot of portrait photography, but I love to incorporate a lot of movement when I'm posing my subjects. So I'll usually get them to, I know it's not like sport photography, but I do get them to walk around and spin around and jump and move quite fast. So I think having that autofocus improvement will be very exciting to test out on the field. I do love the autofocus from the A7R4 and the A7C, so I can only assume that this would be better, so I can't wait to try it out.
Yeah, well, so with the Beyond's XR image processor that the Alpha 1 camera comes with, there is a 1.5 times improvement when it comes to the autofocus performance on the 9 Mark II. And that's just simply upgrading from that older processing engine into the newest one. I mean, Craig, as you're out and you're taking photos and you're, I mean, what does autofocus mean to you when you're out and you're in the field?
I mean, it's everything, especially when, because most of the time I'm shooting, fast moving subjects. So I need it to be spot on. Sometimes I can't afford to, not miss that shot. If I'm working in a high-end commercial or working with nature and something exciting happens and the subjects are moving towards or away from me quite quickly, I need to have that confidence that I know the camera's going to lock on and get the shot. When I was in Africa, that was a big thing for me. Is I needed to make sure, because I was shooting a lot of birds over there, and also the animals running towards us and back again. So yeah, autofocus is just the most important thing. I mean, to get a sharp shot, if you've got a great shot that's not sharp, then you pretty much don't have a shot. So yeah, to know that this camera can focus twice as fast as the A9 Mark II is beyond belief. Like I don't know how Sony have done this. It's kind of weird, not expecting something so amazing so quickly. I expected this maybe 2 years down the track. But this is phenomenal.
Yeah, and on that point there, Craig, about bird photography, I think it's something that we're very excited to be able to bring across as part of our real-time tracking update with the Alpha 1, is that we have had real-time tracking autofocus for humans for quite a while, as well as with animals, but the Alpha 1 introduces a dedicated mode for birds only. So I think there's Mark. I mean, you've dealt with some bird photographers over the years. I mean, no doubt having a autofocus mode which specifically is just for birds can make a difference. And often I've seen so many bird shooters go out and try to chase that moment where maybe the bird's just touching the water, or a moment which is almost impossible, but 30 frames per second, 50 megapixel sensor with a dedicated bird autofocus function. I mean, surely that's something people are asking for.
Yeah, look, the bird photographers probably thought all their Christmases came at once with the Alpha 1. I know a lot of bird photographers, try and work out whether they need an Alpha 7R4 for the croppability, or an Alpha 9 II for the AF performance. And now with the Alpha 1, you don't really have to choose between one or the other, because you have the best of both worlds, really. I'll just cut to my, I'm preparing a little slideshow for a preview. If I just cut to 2 or 3 slides.
I'll bring it up for you now, Mark. So we'll just throw up this.
So first off, one of the things that people noticed who did, bird photographers or wildlife photographers who elected to go for the Alpha 7R4 because of the croppability in low light situations where you need a very, very fast shutter speed. Obviously, the ISO performance typically goes over 1600 ISO, and the Alpha 7R4 in APS-C mode is sort of outside of its comfort zone, really. The Alpha 7R4 is a fabulous camera because of its huge dynamic range and resolution, but it really wasn't designed as an out-and-out sports camera. So when I was watching the launch video, we sort of got to the real-time AF. Now, the real-time AF with the Alpha 9 and Alpha 9 II, you have animal eye AF and AF tracking at the same time. But now we have particularly IAF for birds whilst real-time tracking. So when we got to this section in the movie, I think my mouth hung open, and I basically said, shut up and take my money, because like I don't need to hear anything else really. That's so, because I know so many wildlife photographers who want that croppability, want fast AF, and you can see this image was captured at 1250, but there's other couple of examples of over 2000 ISO, and I'm playing Spot the Noise here. Now, obviously, these photographers who have been lucky enough to use these cameras have almost certainly been shooting in JPEG mode, so there will probably be a little bit of high ISO noise reduction. But already you can see there's still good feather detail in this bird. So already we're up with the 24 megapixel high ISO performance, which is already stellar, but now we've got 50 megapixels. So that's basically all I wanted to show you. I'll obviously get my preview ready soon, but
yeah, no, I think all of that's great. We'll throw up a question. I believe this is from Maui G. If I pronounced your name, I'm very sorry. But the question is, does the Alpha 1 have GPS geotagging? This would be such a wonderful feature as a landscape and wildlife photographer or photojournalist. If not, a new feature perhaps for the second iteration of the Alpha 1. This is a great question, Heath.
My turn. Here we go.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. No, the quick answer is no. It doesn't have built-in GPS geotagging, but what it can do, and it's not the only camera that other Sony cameras can do it as well, is use the Imaging Edge app on your mobile phone, and that will then send the geolocation to the camera. So when you take your photos, the camera is talking to the phone, and it will actually apply the GPS metadata to that photo as it's being recorded. So Alpha 1, just like the 9 Mark II, the 9, 7R4, a lot of our cameras allow you to use the GPS geotagging feature in the Imaging Edge mobile app on your phone.
I'd just like to add that even before the Imaging Edge app allowed for this, if you just took one picture with your mobile phone, if you had internet access, then you could basically sync the geotag information in a program like Lightroom across all of the subsequent shots. You just have to remember to get one image off on your phone, which can always be the behind the scenes shot, and you've got the geotagging information there, which you can sync later in post.
Yeah, great. Another question we've got here is from Colin. Is the Alpha 1 a successor for the Alpha 9 Mark II, or can we expect an Alpha 9 Mark III in the future? The Alpha 9, I'll answer this one. The Alpha 9, the Alpha 1 is not a successor to the Alpha 9 Mark II or that Alpha 9 range. With the Alpha 1, we've introduced an entirely new lineup. This is a camera now which sits at the very top of our pecking order of Alpha cameras. It is now our flagship. So the Alpha 9 series at this point in time is still very much in place and very much in play. And so this is now just the culmination of all that technology we've been able to do and shove it all into one camera. Next question we've got here is the Alpha 1 better for photo or video? Well, what I might do is, Craig, I might get your input on this, because I believe you do own a 7S III. And look, in many ways, the Alpha 1 performs similar to a 7S III and also similar to an A9 Mark II and the 7R Mark IV. So do you have any thoughts based on what we've seen so far on the Alpha 1 in that regard?
Yeah, someone asked me that today, and the best way I could explain it is we've got three of the cameras into one camera. So, we've got the A7S III, we've got the A9 Mark II, we've got the A7R IV, and they've all been pushed into this one body. It's something that I've been waiting for, especially being able to shoot 4K 120 frames underwater and in nature. And then having that 8K 30 frames is absolutely mind-boggling that this camera can do that. And then also being able to switch over to 50 megapixels and get photos that I can print this big and have a massive amount of data in them. So I wouldn't say either photo or video. I think this camera is the package with everything in it. I think its low light capabilities really will work well for photo and video. I'm excited to have this camera as my main camera, and also, especially if I'm working in say, an underwater scene where I don't have the luxury of swapping, A7S3 and an A7R4 out. So it's just going to be great to be able to, whilst I'm underwater, be able to flick over from 50 megapixel stills to 4K 120 and get something that I can sell as a stock vision for BBC or still sort of quality. So it's exciting. I think for me, I'm going to have 2 of these in my camera bag, and it'll be my go-to camera for sure.
Yeah. And Julia, I mean, for your needs or how you see the camera, I mean, do you think it leans one way more to the other, or if you had it, how would you use it?
He took the words right out of my mouth. I see it kind of split equally for both photo and video. I think for professional videographers, there's a lot of features in the A1 that would suit their needs. You've got the 422 10-bit recording, S-Log3, the dual card slots for like video redundancy as well. And then you've got the photo side, which is pretty stacked in the feature set on that end as well. So I do think when I was watching the live stream, it is kind of like a mashup camera between the A7R4, the A7S3, and the A9 II. It's kind of just like all together, but in one camera body, which I think is really convenient, especially if you kind of work on both.
Yeah.
I mean, what I've noticed is a lot of my peers that are photographers, they're getting a lot more video work now. So they're all stoked about this new technology and what it's done, because it's changed the way that we now work. We've got this one body and everything. So it's exciting.
Yeah, I think one of the really exciting things for me is, because I don't shoot a lot of video, but I'm pleased Sony didn't cut out the video. Obviously, with an 8K sensor, it's easy to switch it on. But if they were trying to protect the A7S3 market, you could imagine one of the suits in Sony saying, let's not ruin that A7S3 market. Let's just pull out the profiles and limit it to 4K, and then we won't ruin the market for the A7S3. But they haven't done that. And I think Sony are going back to where I started as an ambassador, which if you've got something really good, stick it in every camera or stick it in one camera. And so, Sony always said when I joined them that what they really liked doing was releasing disruptive technologies. And this Alpha 1 is certainly going to be big news this year. It's going to disrupt the market now for several years to come. And I think any manufacturer who holds back to protect another line of their market segment is basically having a Kodak moment. Kodak tried to, they invented the DSLR and then decided that this could ruin their film business, so they slowed down, except Canon didn't have a film business, so they went ahead, and look, we're a Kodak now, eh? So I think this is the Sony's done absolutely the right thing here, is if you can squeeze it in one camera, by all means go for it. And I don't know whether it will ruin the markets for the Alpha 9 III or the Alpha 7R5, but it's basically just to watch this space. Obviously, the important things to remember is the specialized cameras that just do one thing really well and lend themselves to other things, obviously will be cheaper.
Yeah, that was a question I was actually just about to ask the panel. I was about to ask you, do you see in your use and in your practical use, do you still find that you will use like an Alpha 7S Mark III or an Alpha 7R Mark IV? Do you find that these cameras are still practical and still, still in your kit?
Well, I'll just jump in straight away, and then you can mute me. The Alpha 7S3 was the first Alpha camera I decided not to own since the original A7R were launched, because for me, the other cameras shooting 4K, I have, even on the Alpha 7C, I have 4K video with IAF, and I know how to keep the contrast down, either using profiles or just dropping the contrast, putting dynamic range optimizer up. I can usually do what I need to do. I don't need to do any more because I'm not doing a feature length Hollywood movie. So for me, the video performance of just the other Alpha cameras is more than enough. I will probably still own other Alpha cameras, even though this might well become my main camera. I've really been enjoying taking the Alpha 7C out because I've been shooting the Australia Day, Invasion Day protests yesterday. Having a small light camera and moving in between a crowd is just fantastic.
Yeah, I think you actually hit a real key point there, Mark. It's that each of these cameras, they serve their purpose, all right? And I think the Alpha 1 is fantastic in many ways and adopts a lot of the great features all these cameras do. But depending on each photographer's needs will depend on probably which camera they'll end up choosing. But we did speak a little bit about the video specs, and so I just want to bring up something that kind of highlights them in a neat little package. This was also from the global stream, and this kind of, in a very basic overview, hits on some really key video specs on the Alpha 1. So as we know, 8K, 30p, 4K at up to 120 frames per second, and that 4K is oversampled from a 5.8K readout, 10-bit 422, some stabilization, 10-bit, as Julia mentioned earlier, in S-Log3, raw output via the full-size HDMI, and the big one there to land on is S-Cinetone. So it does have that same color profile that we do see in some of our cinema line cameras. I mean, as far as a product which fits within a videographer's workflow, it certainly ticks all the right boxes with those specs. I mean, once again, I think, Julia, I might throw you in. When we look at those specs, for video function, how do they stack up for you?
I think they look great. I normally use the A7S III for video work, like for my YouTube videos, and my partner does videography professionally as well. The only thing I would be very curious about to see with the A1 is how well it performs in low light, because as we know, the A7S III is crazy in low light conditions, so that would be curious to kind of see that. But aside from that, I think the A1, it looks fantastic for video.
Yeah, we actually do have a question here about... This is it, exactly. Will the 50 megapixel sensor affect the low light capabilities? Heath, I might just get your thoughts on this. What do you reckon here?
Well, the big difference between this camera and the Alpha 7S Mark III is the ISO range that the camera can see in. So the ISO on this camera, the native ISO is from 100 to 32,000 ISO, and that can be expanded down to 50 and up to 102,400. So I'm just making sure I get the right words out. It's not going to hold up as well, obviously, at those higher ISO ranges as the Alpha 7S Mark III is. That camera can shoot up to 409,600, which is just crazy. So obviously, being a 50 megapixel sensor, it's going to be a bit more noise in those upper ISO ranges. But if you're shooting it like a cinematographer and you're using the lower ISO values, even up to like ISO 4000, which is still pretty high for video, you're going to get good usable video features out of the camera. I would just be a bit wary about going too high, especially if you're shooting outside the S-Log profiles, because you're going to have a lot less dynamic range to work with if you're not shooting in S-Log.
Yeah,
I can just chip in on that dynamic range. Dynamic range is really an interesting topic you've finished on there, because For sports photographers, there was enough dynamic range on an Alpha 9 II to photograph, say, a soccer match where there's white jerseys and black shorts, and get rich detail on a sunny day in both. But you've got to get your exposure right to get detail in both the brightest highlights and deep shadows. But on the stacked sensor, they sort of didn't have 15 stops dynamic range. They always had 14 stops dynamic range. So one stop doesn't sound like a lot, but that one stop is one stop. I've missed my exposure by one stop. I'll fix it in post. But now, obviously, the exciting news, and I was curious about where the A7S III, whether the A7S III would actually use a stacked sensor because of the huge amount of data traffic that needed to happen with 4K, 422, 10-bit video. And they didn't go for the stacked sensor with the A7S III. And I suspected, or I thought, because I don't really know, but I thought they didn't go for the stacked sensor because of the dynamic range. And obviously, the A7S III not only has great high ISO performance, it also has great dynamic range. But one of the great things about the new stack sensor in the Alpha 1 is it's caught up with the Alpha 7 cameras. It's now got that 15 stop dynamic range on a stacked CMOS sensor. So obviously, it's taken maybe 3 years for Sony engineers to work out how to build up the dynamic range on this new type of sensor, but hats off to them. They've gone and done it. And so that was great to see. Otherwise, maybe they would have disabled the video footage because they didn't want it to be poorly compared against, say, an A7S III just in sunny weather.
I'm going to wrap up and put up another question here, which is, what are the 1080p FPS specs? Once again, Heath, I might throw this one over to you.
Call me out now, aren't you?
Well,
right. Let me find it.
I think it's 240 frames a second.
240 is the top, yeah.
That's right.
Another top spec is 240 frames per second in 1080p.
Which is really slow. 10 times slow-mo, that's pretty good.
Yeah. And I think the important thing there as well, for my mind, is that in the full HD and the 4K, the Alpha 1, similar to the Alpha 7S Mark III, the Alpha 1 supports both long GOP as well as all intra. So you can get all intra 1080p at 240 frames per second. So that way you're retaining an incredible amount of information. So yeah, I just wanted to touch that one off. So I actually want to wrap back around to some of the photography aspects of the Alpha 1, in particular with the flash and flash sync that the Alpha 1 can do, because this is some pretty groundbreaking stuff we've been able to do. So in the first instance, we can now control flash sync with the electronic shutter, which I believe is a world first inside a mirrorless camera. And then of course it is, because it's an electronic shutter. And then the second thing about that is the sync speed of up to 1/400 seconds. 1/400. So Craig, I mean, how's your experience with flash, and what's your take on being able to use the Alpha 1 like this?
Well, I use strobes a lot underwater, and this is going to be amazing for me, especially with fast-moving subjects. It's going to change everything. And when I'm on set as well, like being able to shoot silent and flash as well, like it's all working great. I feel it's almost the end of the mechanical shutter. I think this technology is going to slowly move out that mechanical shutter, and it's going to be a superseded part of a camera soon, I think. Yeah, I mean, shooting 1/400th of a second on a sporting subject or an animal is just going to be groundbreaking. I haven't used a camera like that before, so yeah.
Yeah. And Mark, I mean, your experience with flash, I suppose one of the big advantages here of using the electronic shutter is that you can also operate it silently now. So you have a silent shutter with flash operation, which is a real game-changing application.
Yeah, and as Craig alluded to, we're just one step closer to getting rid of that shutter mechanism in a camera. And just remember, a lot of people who buy secondhand cameras, they look at the shutter count on the camera, except if you've been using an A9 only for sports, it may never have been used. And you have to remember the shutter is the second most expensive component in the camera. So you see Sony first getting rid of the flip-up mirror, the DSLR mirror, an expensive component. Now they've got the shutter mechanism in their sights, and so well, again, it's the groundbreaking sensor that's doing this. And that 400th of a second on the mechanical shutter, one of the things I used to teach my RMIT uni students who are going into commercial work, a very popular, charismatic commercial style of shooting is to have the flash off camera as the primary light source, and then underexpose the ambient light by 1 or 2 stops. And obviously that requires high-speed sync or working in dull conditions. And high-speed sync is not great for models because they really get blinded by the prolonged duration of the flash. And high-speed sync lowers the overall power of that flash as well. So just being able to move up 1/400th of a second will lower the ambient light, but is using the full light before we go into high-speed sync. So this is, it's a groundbreaking change. Some of the photographers out there are constrained by 1/160th of a second, and have 1/400th of a second just means you've got that 2 stops. You can lower the ambient light without high-speed sync, and that just means you can put like a HVL60 flash in a diffuser and not go for your pro photo strobes, and you might be able to get the power from a strobe you're carrying in a pocket. So this shouldn't be underestimated. This flash is huge, and I'm not primarily a flash shooter, but it is going to be huge for a lot of photographers out there.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got another question here from Colin, which says, which full-frame E-mount lenses are needed to take full advantage of the Alpha 1's impressive 30 frames per second capabilities? Will it be limited to the newer G-Master lenses with XD linear motors? Great question, Colin. It's a really good one. We do have a list of lenses which go beyond just the G-Masters with XD linear motors. But of course, listing all of them off the top of my head, I don't know if I have quite that good of a memory. I think that this list might be available through the Sony Global site. Heath, have you seen anything readily available in this way?
Not online as of today, but I had my head buried in all our training manuals and stuff like that for the day. So I have seen a list. I know it exists, so I'm sure it'll be made available to everybody as soon as possible.
Yeah, look, I could chip in a little bit there. Because we've done a little short movie on the XD linear focus motors, haven't we, Heath?
We have, Mark.
We have. And look, you can see Sony have been popping them into almost every new lens they've been releasing for a while. So, typically you might think, I've got to buy one of those expensive white Sony lenses to get that fast AF. But they're not just limited to those white telephoto zooms. Like, for instance, the 135 G-Master has dual linear XD motors. So it's super fast focusing lens. But then it appears in some lenses where we might not even expect it, such as, the 35 1.8. So not a hugely expensive lens, but that if you can't afford the G-Master 1.4, go for the 35 1.8, and you've still got your fast motor. It's like we used to often look for lenses to see whether they got OSS. If we just check the specs to see if it's got even a single XD linear focus motor, you probably know it's going to keep up with these modern cameras. And I suspect Sony knew what they were going to release today, because they've been putting those XD linear focus motors in, nearly every lens they've been releasing over the last year or two.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, even our APS-C lenses have it as well. Our two recently released APS-C, the 16 to 55. And then the 70 to 350 APS-C lenses, they've got those as well.
Yeah, I do know there's around 23 lenses that will support up to 30 frames. per second. There's 4 or 5 others which won't go that high. And there's others that will just only do 15 frames. So there'll be some will only go as far as 15. I think 3 or 4 others that will just do 20 frames, but there's at least 23 lenses that will do 30 frames a second. So
yeah,
I think it's important to point out as well that the camera is doing most of the heavy lifting on an A9, A9 II Alpha 1. Because you don't have any blackout when you're shooting with a fully electronic shutter, what's not happening that is happening to all of the other cameras, it's like the camera is blinking with a mechanical shutter, and then when the shutter reopens, it's got to find the subject and re-lock on to the subject. It's like a mystery. Did the subject carry on tracking forward at the same speed as it was tracking before the shutter closed last time? It's even worse with the mirror. But with a constant live view, those focus points are locked on for dear life, and they're not being temporarily blinded in between each frame. So, I think people will be surprised how many lenses perform really well with an Alpha 9.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Alpha 1.
Yeah. We'll move on to this next question here. How does the Alpha 1 size compare to the other Alpha cameras? We did get this question a little bit earlier today. So I have set up a brief little comparison here in my small studio. So I'm going to take a second in an attempt to try to get this to come up. So bear with me, everybody. So what we've got on camera at the moment, this is the Alpha 9 as well as the Alpha 7R Mark IV. And we are very lucky tonight to have the only Alpha 1 unit here in Australia. But you can actually see that they are the same size. So the Alpha 1 does sit in the same size bracket as the Alpha 9 Mark II and the Alpha 7R Mark IV. So part of the great thing when it comes to the size is, of course, the battery grip, the battery extension grip for the 9 Mark II or the 7R Mark IV remains exactly the same. And you can see, even from the top down, for the most part, they are still very, very similar with their dimensions. When you have a look at the back, the only real big difference you can see is that with the Alpha 1 camera, we can see that a record button has been relocated to the back of the unit, whereas for our, and slightly enlarged from the Mark II and Mark IV. But as we can see, for the most part, it is much the same size as every other recently released camera in that lineup.
People may have noticed there was a small difference in the electronic viewfinder there. The eye proximity sensor was at the bottom rather than the top. And one should point out the incredible resolution they've stuck in. It was first seen on the A7S III, but there's like 9 million dots in that electronic viewfinder. Compare that to the 2 million dots in my Alpha 7C, and you realize you've got like 4 times the resolution you're looking at in through that viewfinder. I love
the viewfinder of the A7S III. It's great.
Like real life.
Yeah, and the truly incredible thing is that viewfinder on the Alpha 7S III, it has 120 frames per second, but as a world first, because the Alpha 1 just has to do a number of world firsts, it does do 240 frames per second refresh on the viewfinder. So yeah, looking through that is truly incredible. So Kans has asked, does blackout-free work with both electronic and mechanical shutters? Heath, I might throw this one over to you.
Another quick one for me is no, it doesn't. So the blackout-free only works with electronic shutter. That's just the nature of the electronic shutter itself. With the mechanical shutter, there is a physical shutter coming down in front of the sensor to cut off the light. So unfortunately, we cannot have blackout-free shooting with the mechanical shutter.
Yeah, great.
Just to explain technically what's happening there is, if you can imagine a flatbed scanner, and as you're scanning a document, if you start moving the paper halfway through scanning the document, you get distortion. And that's what you get with electronic shutter silent shooting on Alpha 7 cameras using conventional, silent shooting. But what's happening with the Alpha 9 cameras and now the Alpha 1 camera, it's like you've supercharged your flatbed scanner, and that scanner is going down that flatbed 15 times faster than a conventional sensor. And so that's where you remove the shutter distortion, which is absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, we'll move on. There's a couple of really great questions starting to come through on the chat. So we might draw our attention for the minute to some of these extra questions. So Joseph has asked, how long can the Sony Alpha 1 record 8K? We have tested the Alpha 1 to record 8K footage in 30 frames per second to 30 minutes, and that's under Sony tests, but continuous recording of 30 minutes. We did do a test here ourselves in the office, and that seemed to be true for us here. There are some other really great questions. Can the Sony Alpha 1 record on 2 cards? Once again, the answer is yes. So like many dual SD card, or in this case, dual media with the CF Express Type A cards, we do have the ability to relay, or you can redundancy record. So that way on both slots, you can either designate them for stills or photos specifically, or you can relay record from one to the next. So yes, you can record onto 2. And now this is another really great question that's come up from Lars, which is, when shooting 30 frames per second, does the Alpha 1 take 12-bit or 14-bit RAW files? Heath, if you want to explain this, I'm actually going to hook the Alpha 1 camera up, and we'll just explore this new RAW file that we've added in to the Alpha 1. So bear with me just one moment as I attempt a little bit of magic. Here we go.
Okay. So, all right. When it's shooting in RAW, it's got 3 flavors of RAW. You've got uncompressed, compressed, and then lossless compressed. So what that means is, as Nick's showing us on the screen right now, you can shoot just raw, uncompressed. It's the entire raw file with no compression added by the camera. A lossless compression is just an algorithm squeezing the file, I guess you could say, but without losing any of the data. It will be added back in, I guess, when you uncompress the file. But compressed is a lossy version. So you're going to get a file which is around 50% the size of an uncompressed raw file, but you are going to lose some of the information in there during that compression. Now, they are still all going to be 14-bit files. They're just going to be, the compression is going to change as you're saving them in the camera.
Yeah, great. I think one of the other big things there about the 12 and 14-bit, if you wish to take 14-bit raw photos, you have to go down to the 20 frames per second. So I believe that's, again, this information is all fresh in our minds, but I'm sure that if you are chasing that 14-bit raw, you are shooting in 20 frames per second, but for 12-bit, you can do the 30 frames per second raw.
And that's going to be the lossless compressed, sorry, the lossy compressed.
Lossy. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, really good question. Yeah, wonderful one. Mark has asked, what is the difference on the left-hand base dial? It has changed, I believe. All right, I'll quickly try to change and throw us back onto the previous camera, and we'll have a quick look. Stand by. So if we have a look at the, this is the 9 Mark II camera that we have here. And if we look at the dial on the left-hand side, we can see that our focus mode is still the same and our drive mode is the same. When we look at the Alpha 1 camera, if I tilt this down, you can actually see for the most part it is still the same. Drive mode is up the top here, and our focusing mode dial is on the bottom, just slightly changed for a little bit of different ergonomics on the Alpha 1. But if I try my best to get both in here, you can see for the most part functionality is much the same, just slightly different on the design there. So that's that. And I'll jump back in. All right. Well, what else have we got to look at? I think that there is a few more little operability things that we can discuss, and I'd love to get your thoughts on. I mean, Craig, often you are out in the wild. You really do push your alpha cameras to the limits. I mean, with the Alpha One, it builds on this design that we've been going for, with improved weather resistance and as well as improved sealing around the ports. I mean, how important is that to you when you're out in the wild?
It is, because that's always on the back of your mind. And if it's sprinkling rain and you've got a camera that isn't very well sealed, you're going to be focusing on the the camera getting damaged rather than the shot. So for me, to limit as much concern as I can about my gear is so important. To focus on that shot. Yeah, it's exciting to see this camera has even better weather sealing than the A9 series of cameras. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to definitely help my peace of mind, and I'm sure a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, and Julia, I mean, as you're out doing all your content as well, and shooting your photos and videos, I mean, surely the having the robust design, the magnesium alloy body, and now having the CF Express Type A cards really must help to speed up that workflow as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I know my photo shoots always look very pretty on YouTube and calm and cool, but sometimes you have to deal with weather on location photo shoots as well, even if it's not out doing like wildlife photography, like it rains and sometimes you have no choice but having to shoot through it. So that is very important to me. And yeah, also having a robust body is good as well.
Yeah. And another point to make, this is a feature that we've been adding in the last few iterations of the Alpha camera, which is the digital audio interface, or the adaptation of the MI hot shoe for audio capture. I mean, once again, Julia, you might have to record audio in the field. I mean, how important is it to capture high quality audio when you're making these videos?
So important. I think one of the most important parts of a video is the audio. And if you have bad audio, it doesn't matter how good your visual is, because the audio just really carries that video and gets your message across and just makes it so much easier to watch if you can clearly understand what's happening. So yeah, super important. I would say it's almost more important sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think the big thing there is that the Alpha One does support the 4-channel 48 kilohertz, very similar to the Alpha 7S Mark III. So that way, if you do have a digital audio interface supported microphone like the ECM B1M or the XLR K3M, you're taking full advantage of that digital audio interface through the MI hot shoe. What else do we have to talk about? Let me just quickly go through. So Heath, I know that we've been working a lot lately with some of our other professional photographers when it comes to file transfer protocol and setting up a system which is to deliver images in a very speedy and a professional way. And of course, the Alpha 9 Mark II, they kind of cut their niche, being cameras that could deliver over FTP within the Sony system. The Alpha One builds on that legacy built by the Alpha 9 and 9 Mark II, now has 2 internal antennas, supports 5G data transferring as well as the 1000 base T Ethernet port. Can you just speak to us a little bit about maybe some of the photographers we've been dealing with in the last weeks or so about that FTP and how the Alpha One is going to work with that?
Yeah, absolutely. We have the Australian Open coming up very shortly, the tennis tournament here in Melbourne. So I've been dealing with some of the pro photographers who are shooting on Sony and some of the people at Tennis Australia, getting them all set up so they can instantly transfer files from the camera to a remote server, which is then accessed by picture editors who are in different states, obviously because of various lockdowns and have you, which means they can then access those files to get them either sent out for print publication or up online for immediate delivery. So what the Alpha 9 and 9 Mark II were designed for those pro sports and news photographers and really excelled at being able to get those files delivered quickly and off the camera. With the Alpha 1, though, those speeds you're talking about, the 3.5 times faster transfer speed from the camera via Wi-Fi, getting those files out insanely fast. It just means that if you're a working photographer, it's all about delivery. There's no point filling your memory card up full of images of a world's changing event, and then just say, oh, I just have to pop home to my computer and do some retouch. It doesn't work that way. If something's happening now, the world needs to know about it straight away. And having those various options, including the Ethernet, Wi-Fi, FTP, as well as the wired FTP via USB-C to your phone, that's a real game changer. And you can use the Imaging Edge transfer and tag app on the phone. That can also then allow you to apply the IPTC metadata, which is something that a lot of sports and news journalists have to do. That applies all the information about the shot, where it was taken, who was involved, all of that kind of thing. That can all be done seamlessly by, you can just either have every image you take being transferred from the camera directly to a remote server or directly to your phone, which you can then, or iPad or something like that, you can then select which ones you'd like to have sent off. Or you can have a custom button like I do on the 9 Mark II, shooting away, and as you're reviewing the photos, just hitting send on your keepers that you want to send to the server.
Yeah, great. I think that something that sort of came out to me just then, Heath, as you were talking through it, and it goes to everything we've spoken about tonight so far, is that the Alpha 1, in many ways, everything you're describing sounds so familiar to me, or it sounds similar, and that's because there's another camera in the Alpha lineup which does it, but just doesn't do it as good. The Alpha 1 just takes everything that's been built and everything that's been put in place for the entire Alpha lineup, and then just takes that to the next level and just puts it up that extra step. We have another question here from Andrew, who says, do you need CF Express Type A cards for 30 frames per second RAW? That's a great question, Andrew. I didn't see anything in the training material up to this point.
I could chip in if you want.
Oh
yeah. Look, it shouldn't affect the 30 frames per second if you're shooting on an SDXE2 card. What you're obviously going to run up against is the buffer capacity and how quickly the buffer can write to those cards. So if you're running a CFA Express card, which is more than twice as fast as the fastest SDXE2 card at 300 megabytes write speed, you're basically going to be clearing the buffer out as quickly using the new card as you were on an A9 II. So the buffer is still listed as being 240 raw files in the compressed mode. And so somebody who's upgrading from an Alpha 9 II won't notice the camera is slowing down or the buffer is any smaller if they do invest in those CF Express A cards. The other advantage, of course, for the general user who is going to invest in those cards, even if they're not doing FTP transfer, is that USB port is twice as fast. We're now up to 10 gigabytes per second. So you're basically going to empty off your 128 gigabyte card very quickly, even if you're just emptying it off to an iPad Pro or a laptop with USB-C port. You're basically going to clear that card off in next to no time and be able to put the card back in and format it and be ready to go a couple of minutes later. So you've got the luxury of 50 megapixel files, but it shouldn't really impact on your general workflow. What you might find is when you're doing some serious editing of those 50 megapixel files, you'll notice that if you're running a 5-year-old computer, you might be scratching your head going, maybe it's time. And the other thing that people don't realize when they're editing, maybe with their new 60 megapixel A7R4, and they've just upgraded to a 4K monitor, it's megapixels, 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 and things do slow down when you throw more data at the thing. Absolutely. But of course, the great news from an Apple side of things is the new M1 chips are 3 times faster than the Intel chips. So, There you go. We shouldn't really notice. We shouldn't, if you cross, dot your I's, cross your T's, you shouldn't really notice that you're now dealing with 50 megapixel files. I'll have to say though, I'm not looking forward to editing an 8K movie file. My computer probably won't go there.
Well, that is in the H.265 compression, so it's a little bit nicer for those computers that can handle it.
Okay,
Look,
cool.
I think for the most part, we've really gone over some of the really key specs of the Alpha One, which is fantastic. What we might do at this point, we've got 5 or 6 minutes or so more to go. We might just speed through some of these last questions that we have here. Of course, if you have any more questions and you're viewing from home, please throw them in. We'll do our best to answer them in this last 5 minutes. And of course, if you have any questions specifically for Julia, Mark, or Craig, throw them in and we'll see if we can answer them. But we'll speed through some of these as we go. So Greg has asked, what is the speed of the mechanical shutter? You're getting a maximum of 10 frames per second from the mechanical shutter. We'll go to the next question, which is, what happens when the 30-minute 8K recording runs out? Can the camera take photos while it's cooling down? So, Heath, with the Alpha One, similar to the Alpha 7S Mark III, we have used the Sigma heat sink design. This is a passive cooling system inside the Alpha One camera. Allows for incredible workflow and heat dissipation inside the camera itself. We here, unfortunately, we haven't tested what happens when the camera gets to that recording limit. So we can't give a truthful answer at this stage, unfortunately, to that question. How much megabits is the 8K video? Is there internal raw video recording? Heath, I might throw this one over to you.
I believe the 8K is 400 megabits and there is no internal raw recording.
Yeah, great. But there is external raw. So you can
do 4.3K 16-bit raw external via the full-size HDMI port.
Yeah, perfect. Wonderful. We'll move on to our next question, which is, does the Alpha One allow you to change the raw size, or is it just in JPEG? It is just in JPEG, but you do have 4 sizes now, I believe. So I'll just quickly show this as I change over. Stand by, everybody, as I do this once more. So as we go into here, we can see that when we change our file format down to JPEG, we now have our options. In JPEG image size, you have the 50 megabits, 21, and 12. But the key thing that we've added here is we've actually added a 4th quality, which is light. And this light option goes to what Heath was speaking about earlier with FTP when capturing images and delivering them faster than the competition is your job, you want to be able to deliver them as quickly as possible. And so having slightly smaller file sizes could be the difference in that instance. So you have those 3 image sizes, but then 4 variable image qualities.
I will just mention, though, you can also FTP video files,
yes.
But you'd want to have a very good broadband connection or NBN connection if you want to be sending video files, especially if they're 8K. So yeah, but it is possible to FTP video and stills, including raw files.
Yes, yeah, true. Next question is, does the Alpha One lock-on autofocus modes change automatically based on what it sees, or is it still a manual change? What do you think is my interpretation here of this question? I feel like part of the advantage of locked on or for the Alpha One is real-time tracking is that it is actually incredibly tenacious and it will stick on the subject until you manually change it. Does anyone have a different reading on this question? Or
the way I'll just jump in real quick. The way I understand it is instead of actually being lock on, I think the Alpha One actually does have real-time tracking, which is different to lock on. But in terms of tracking, what it does do as part of real-time tracking is differentiate between an eye, the back of a head, something like that. So what it's going to do is it'll shift from eye tracking. If it can't recognize an eye, it'll track a face. If it can't recognize a face, it'll then track an object. But if you're asking, does it shift from human to animal to bird, then no. You are going to have to change that. And you also will have to shift from the tracking mode, whether it's the flexible spot, small, medium, large, wide or zone, those sort of things as well.
Yeah, Mark, I was just about to say,
Yeah.
you've had a lot of time using the real-time tracking function itself,
Yeah, look,
right?
I'm a big fan of the real-time tracking since it first appeared on the Alpha 6400, and as I use it in parades or demonstrations, and people are passing between me and the subject, it's amazing how tenacious and sticky the focus tracking is now. You've got parameters where you can increase the stickiness. Some people move it to responsive because the word responsive sounds very good, but actually that makes it more flighty, less sticky. You actually want the locked on #1 version, and then you can have an incredibly small portion of your subject left, and it carries on with that. One of the things that it happens when it loses the eye and moves to a face, if it loses the face, it moves to the object nearest where the face was. So if somebody holds up their arm in front of the camera, but there's a little bit of their head left poking either side of the arm, it holds on to that because it knows about distance. And one of the new things compared to the third generation of Alpha 7s, it also knows about texture. And so the arm doesn't have the same texture as the beard or hair of the model, so it just ignores the object that's just momentarily appeared in front.
And
I mean, the DP review now just say that the tracking is absolutely state of the art, and it just keeps getting better with every new subsequent camera. The tracking just becomes stickier, more intelligent. Yeah, and one of the great things that used to happen with the Alpha 9 cameras, if you're doing slow panning with the shutter speed slowing down and you're in shutter priority, if the camera is forced into f/22, the phase detect autofocus would get locked on the first frame and bow out for subsequent frames. And that's another thing that's been improved with the Alpha 1 is you can use all f-stops on the camera. That right down to f/22, and phase detect keeps hanging in there.
Yeah, true. I mean, Julia, what's your experience using the real-time tracking? Is that something you find even in your portrait at studio shoots? Yeah.
Yeah, the A7C has lightning fast autofocus and tracking. And I do a lot of, when I do lens reviews and tests of that stuff, I love to do a screen recording to show the IAF and the tracking. And sometimes when I'm in the shot, I purposely try to lose that autofocus and it just doesn't work. It keeps up with me no matter what. If my hair's in my face, if I cover like one of my eyes, it just knows where I am at all times. So it's very impressive.
Yeah. And Craig as well. I mean, surely you've had plenty of experience using the real-time tracking functionality.
Oh yeah, like I used it in Africa in 2019, and that was just an absolute godsend. Having the ability to track a lion's eyes, you know, and have them pin sharp, means everything for a photo. I mean, and this new camera, the A1 is just going to blow it out of the water, and it's going to be incredible to see the results.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, we'll answer that one last question, which flashed up because it was an easy one, which is what's the megapixels in APS-C? It shoots at, the resolution is 21 megapixels in the APS-C crop mode. Look, I think we got one final question here from Sam. It says, will Julia have access to the Alpha 1 soon? Reviews, photo shoots coming. Any clear ideas around when the camera is available for order? I can answer maybe half of that question, which is that the camera will be ready for order, I believe, at the end of this week, with shipping happening late February. But Julia may have to answer the first part. Or maybe it's surprise and delight.
Yeah, as soon as I can get my hands on it, there will definitely be some review videos and some videos diving into some of the features. Maybe some videos specifically about electronic versus mechanical shutter, like things like that, I think would be really interesting. So yeah, lots of videos to come on my channel if I can get my hands on it soon.
Wonderful. Well, look, before we sign off, is there any final thoughts? Maybe Craig, if you have any final thoughts on this?
You know, if I was to ask Santa for a camera, this would be it. You know, this is everything I've ever wanted. I've always had in the back of my mind this ultimate camera, and I was like, somebody, Sony, please make it, and they've done it. And honestly, like, everyone I've spoken to today that's either a Canon shooter or a Nikon shooter is just gone, yeah, this is the camera of cameras. It's just amazing. So that's where I'm going to leave it. I think it's exciting, and it's an exciting future that Sony's doing now. You've got the electric cars, you've got the drones, have this Sony drone and have the A. Imagine that, the A1. It's just going to be next level. So I'm just excited about the future.
And Mark, any final thoughts on the Alpha One?
Yeah, I think I'd leave for my final thought. I would say that there's many people watching who realise that they're going to have to sell a kidney to buy this camera or something, and will be slightly disappointed at the price point. But I'd like to leave a message of encouragement. Is our major investment as photographers is in our glass, our lenses. And what this camera proves is you've made the right choice by investing in E-mount glass, because the feature set in this camera, even if you don't own the camera this year or even next year, you're seeing what's coming. The trickle down economy of Sony features will make its way down. You only had to look at the landmark camera of the A7 III, which had nothing new. But it got bits of other alpha cameras, more, cameras that were twice the price, and that trickle down economy of what Sony engineers are producing is going to arrive in a camera that you can afford quite soon, I would imagine. So just take that to heart. Is you may not own this camera this year, but you've made the right choice in investing in Sony glass.
And Julia, final thoughts on the Alpha One?
Same thing as Mark. I was going to say the Alpha One is super exciting. It's an amazing beast of a camera with so many features. And I think another very exciting thing about it is getting to see how this tech is going to trickle down into the other range of Sony cameras, like the 7 series. I think will be very interesting to see what the future holds for Sony cameras.
Yeah, great. Heath, I would ask you for your final thought, but I know it's not going to be a final thought because we'll be doing this many more times over.
We will. Yeah, I'm just a bit jealous that I'm in Melbourne and you got the only one in Sydney. Yeah. So congratulations, my friend.
Yeah. That question about when Julia is going to get the camera, I think we're all going to be fighting.
Yeah. It's going to be a long line.
There is only one. It's the one.
One camera to rule.
The one camera, the Alpha One.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to say to the panel tonight, thank you so much for joining me to break apart the Alpha One. In 24 hours, we've been able to see what this camera can do, and in the modern age, we can now jump online and actually discuss it and really pull it apart and find out the things that we love about it the most. So thank you so much for your time this evening. For everyone watching at home, we do have our clip on the Alpha One. So if you didn't get a chance to see this at the global launch, I'll play this for you right now. But otherwise, that is it from us here on the panel. Thank you very much again for your time this evening. We hope you learned some stuff, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Alpha.